Hey everyone, how's it going? Azrin here, owner of the Calgary Language Nerds, and welcome to another Learn Gujarati with me YouTube video and, of course, podcast episode. We will kick things off today the same way that we have in the past, and I'll share some tried and true, really effective language learning advice, and then we'll transition into some Gujarati learning. So over the past couple of episodes, I've been telling you about the importance of active vocabulary and passive vocabulary. We've been talking about how when you have an ample vocabulary size, it benefits your comprehension, it benefits your speaking, it can often help you with your grammar, it benefits you in many different ways. We've been talking about this regularly over the past few episodes. And we've also talked about how if you're trying to increase your vocabulary, which is absolutely crucial, one of the most important things to ever do, if you're trying to do that, listening and reading are your two absolute best ways to do that. So, what I want to really drive home today, first of all, it's more of a reminder, it's that listening and reading will come before speaking. So, if you did zero speaking practice, if you did like none, literally zero, if you did no speaking practice and you just did listening and reading for like 6 months or like 9 months or something like that, if you just did that for a very, very, very long time and you never really spoke, that still could be, in fact, it probably would be an excellent idea. Speak, listening and reading a lot and not doing any speaking for a certain period of time is actually just fine. You need to, one could make a very strong argument for developing your vocabulary first before worrying about speaking. And see, if you had talked to me even 4 years ago, I wouldn't have believed that as strongly. I would have said that that's not a bad thing. I would have said that, yes, you can listen. Yes, you can read. I would have said, yeah, those are great ideas. But I wouldn't have been like a strong believer of it. But now, in 2023, which I've told you before, when I started to really measure fluency in measurable, very specific terms, what I found is that if you don't have an ample vocabulary size, nine times on 10, speaking just won't happen. You won't be able to do it. There's almost no point, There's almost no point to speaking. And I stress almost because there's a couple of counterpoints to that argument that do make sense. But pretty much for today's video and today's podcast, we can pretty much just say that you need to have an ample vocabulary size first before you even worry too much about speaking. In fact, if you have the ample vocabulary size, the speaking 9 times on 10 is going to come pretty much automatically. Yeah, pretty much automatically. So that's the first thing I want to start with. Now, when we look at the importance of having an ample vocabulary size, we look at the importance of knowing lots and lots of words, lots of phrases, and really having them internalized. Well, there is a linguist by the name of Dr. Stephen Krashen, and he has something called the comprehensible input hypothesis. That's what he calls it. And it's a popular, it's a very, it's a very, it is a very popular, yeah, it's a good way to put it. It's a very popular way for people to teach languages. Now, it's not necessarily traditional. If you go to a typical class with a textbook or something like that, comprehensible input is almost certainly not going to be something that the class is founded on. The class is not going to run on like, the teacher's not going to use comprehensible input as the primary theory that they base their classes around. They're going to use completely different methods. They're not going to worry too much about comprehensible input. But when you look at people who are polyglots, like me, who speak multiple languages, when you look at people who really have looked into the craft of teaching languages and have really studied it and really understand it, it is almost guaranteed that at least some portion of how they teach is going to use comprehensible input. And many people go as far as to say that comprehensible input is the most important thing you would ever need. So what is comprehensible input? What does that even mean? Well, comprehensible input in like really simple layman's terms is listening and reading material that is at your level. Listening and reading material that you're interested in, at least somewhat, and is at your level. It's a fancy, the comprehensible input hypothesis basically states, that if you just consume listening and reading content at your level, if you consume a lot of it, that's going to be a primary engine for your progress in a language. And I think that is, boy, I don't know if that's 100% true. I don't know. I can't say definitively. What I can say is like, boy, oh boy, comprehensible input, aka listening and reading material that is at your level and at least somewhat interesting that you consume, that is something that really can help you to improve in your language ability. So in fact, one thing you don't know until today is that when I've been making these videos, I actually have in the back of my mind the whole comprehensible input hypothesis. And in fact, what we're going to do today on the Gujarati side of things, I'll share my screen. I'm going to show you a silly little story that I wrote like, I don't know, 4 years ago, something like that. See, when you have, I'll share my screen in a second here. When you have these comprehensible input style of stories that people write. In fact, if you ever Google or YouTube, if you're curious, if you YouTube like comprehensible input story Spanish, comprehensible input story French, comprehensible input story Mandarin, like in the quote unquote popular languages, not Gujarati, widely learned languages, comprehensible input is something that people actually make these stories that are based off of comprehensible input. And you'll notice that they have this, how would you say? They're kind of silly. They're like they're almost silly in a way sometimes. They're not like, they're kind of silly stories. I actually don't know why they're silly. I'm not 100% sure. I think human beings are very imitative creatures. We copy each other. So I think people are just copying the style of writing these stories. I actually don't know. The point is, I wrote a story. Let me share my screen. This is years ago. And I was like, oh my God, I still have some of these stories I wrote. Let's actually make them, let's put them on video and share them with people, right? You can become a tool to increase your vocabulary, teach you some basic grammar, and give you some comprehensible input to really drive your progress forward in Gujarati. So this is a super, I pre-warn you, this is a very silly little story that I wrote. And the English title is Amit is a vegetarian crocodile. So in Gujarati, Amit Shakahari Magar Che. Amit Shakahari Magar Che. Amit is the name. Shakahari is a vegetarian. Magar is a crocodile. Che means is. So Amit Shakahari Magar Che. A Amit Che. Tenu naam, sorry, Amit Che. Sorry. A Magar Che. Tenu naam Amit Che. So a Magar Che, very basic sentence. You'll see the sentence pattern a lot in like really basic Gujarati sentences. A Magar Che. This is a crocodile. A Magar Che. Tenu naam Amit Che. His name is Amit. Now we'll do a little tangent. I mentioned this, I think in like probably like episode 5 or 4, something like that on this YouTube channel and on the podcast. We talked about different ways to say he and she. So in Gujarati, we have, well, let's keep it simple for today. We have 3 really basic, let me stop my screen share. We have 3 really basic ways to say he and she. There's more than 3, but we'll just keep it really basic today. There are 3 basic ways to say he and she, and all 3 of them are correct. We have te, e, and e. Te, e, and e. Now, te, if you were to ask a native Gujarati person, what's the difference between te, e, and e? They're going to tell you most likely that te, oh yeah, te and e, you can use whichever one. Te, e, like it's all kind of the same. But in reality, what I found by actually observing for thousand plus hours how Gujaratis talk, what I have found is that te is used far more often in writing. So if you're having an article or something like that, probably they're going to use a lot of te. And again, te means he or she. E is like your standard word for he and she when you talk. And e is a non-standard variant of e. So e also means he or she, e, but it's not everyone, not all Gujaratis use it. It's very regional. So my family is an example. They say e, they don't say e, they don't say te, they say e. But again, that is a non-standard variant. I actually couldn't tell you exactly what regions use it. I'm not 100% sure. I can tell you that my family, if you really trace the roots back, it's a bit, you have to jump back a little bit, but the roots come from, it's a Kathiawadi Gujarati. So there's the roots from over there. They were in Uganda for a few generations. And so that also influences things. But the point is, E is kind of your most common, the most standard, quote unquote, word for he and she. Te is also very, very standard, but only used for more often than not used in writing, not necessarily used in speech as often. Okay, let me share my screen again. So here we have the sentence, Tenu naam Amit che. You could also say Enu naam Amit che. So his name is Amit. We can do a tiny bit more grammar here. We can make this a little bit of a longer video and do a little bit more grammar here. So a crash course on how to talk about possession. So if you want to say like his or her, or like, you know, in English, we have like an apostrophe S. We have like, for example, Sam, like Sam's car, Roberta's house, like that. Roberta's, a little apostrophe S. One Gujarati, we do that with no, nu, ni, or na. 4 different choices. So for example, if I said like Sam's house, Sam, nu, ghar. Sam, nu is the apostrophe S, ghar. Sam, nu, ghar. Or like, even like, if this doesn't make sense, I'm not super worried about it, but I'll still introduce it in case some of you make the connection. Even if you wanted to say like his house, like Sam nu ghar, Sam's house. If you want to say his house, we know that e is he. So e nu ghar would be his house. Does that make sense? Some of you will get that, some of you not. If you don't get it, it's totally fine. If you do want a deeper dive, like kind of like a longer video just on that, I'm happy to make one. But the point is that nu, no, ni, and na, those 4, it basically we use them for possession. In English, it's typically an apostrophe S. Now, when do we use nu? When do we use no? When do we use ni? When do we use na? Like, when do we, which of the 4 do we use? Well, Gujarati is a language where every single noun has a gender. So, as an example, ghar, a house, ghar is a neutral or a neuter noun. There's no gender on it. It's like a neuter gender, right? If we look at I don't know, we look at something like I always use this example, it just pops in my head, like a door, darvajo is masculine. If we look at something like bilari is a cat, bilari is feminine. If we look at, you know, plural is pretty straightforward. Plural just means more than one, so that's really easy to understand. So if I'm saying like my cat, Sam's cat, because cat, bilari is feminine, we say ni bilari. Ni has to go with bilari. Ni has to match, because bilari is feminine. We have to use the feminine version of like that possession. So ni bilari. But for house, nu ghar, because house is neuter. Nu goes for, let me share my screen again. I actually write this out for you. I know it's a little confusing. I can make like a whole separate, really detailed grammar video on it if you guys want, but let me share my screen here. Okay. Let me get a thing here. Okay. So nu, that's for neuter, like a neutral gender. No, that's for masculine. Ni, this is for feminine. Feminine. Note that ni has other uses, so sometimes you'll see ni in other places, which we're not gonna talk a lot about today. And lastly, na. Na is pretty much like a really simple way to view it as plural. There's a little bit more to it than that, but for today we can keep it really easy and it's just plural. So like Sam's house. Sam's house. House is a neuter word. Is a neutral word. So Sam nu ghar. Sam's brother. Sam no bhai, because brother is masculine. Sam's cat. Sam ni bilari, because bilari is feminine. Sam's, I don't know, parents, or I don't know, Sam's, sure, parents, why not? Sam na ma bap. Okay. All right. Enough grammar. Let's keep going with the story. Kind of got sidetracked a bit. Okay. તો આ મગર છે એનું નામ અમિત છે. આ હાથી છે. હાથી is a elephant. આ હાથી છે એનું નામ કાજલ છે. આ વાઘ છે. વાઘ is a tiger. તેનું નામ રાજ છે. I'm gonna read this. I've written this out with Tenu, like Tenu, all these T's. I'm gonna read it with A actually, because it's more spoken language. I'm gonna read it with A, even though I've written this T. So, a Vandro che. Vandro is a monkey. A Vandro che. Enu naam Shivam che. A Tadao che. Tadao is a lake, as you can see. And that's the main characters of our story. Here we go. Amit chale che. Amit is walking. Amit chale che. Amit tadaoma jai che. So Amit tadaoma, in the tadao, in the lake, jai che. He is going in the lake. Amit tadaoma jai che. Amit tadaoma che. Amit is in the lake. Kajal chale che. So Kajal's walking. Kajal ne taras lagi che. So we'll take a little mini grammar break here. We'll do a little bit of grammar. So Kajal ne taras lagi che. So what's going on here? So it means Kajal's thirsty. That's what that means. In Gujarati, we have we'll simplify it to start. In Gujarati, we have a lot of what I would call set phrases. A lot of set phrases with the word mane. Mane is one word for I. There's other words for I, but it's one of the words for I. But mane, when we use mane for I, 95% of the time, mane is part of a set phrase. So for example, I'm thirsty. Mane taras lagi che. I'm hot, like it's really hot outside. Mane garmi pare. Mane garmi pare che. I'm whatever. Whatever is happening. I'm hungry. Mane bhook lagi che. So there's a bunch of them. I couldn't tell you how many. Maybe there's 100. Who knows? There's like a bunch of these set phrases that use the word mane. Now, notice in mane, we have a ne, right? Mane. We have a ne at the end. We can take that ne and we can add it to someone's name. So if I want to say, so I'm hungry, mane, or I'm thirsty. Let's do thirsty. I'm thirsty. Mane taras lagi che. If I want to say someone else is thirsty, we still take that ne, mane, we take that ne, and I would say, for example, Raj ne taras lagi che, or Kajal ne taras lagi che. We stick that ne after the person's name. And we can do that, by the way, for not just names. We can do it for, I'll give you an example. The word for you is tame. Tame is like the standard word for you, quote unquote, tame. But if I want to say you're thirsty, well, remember, being thirsty is a set phrase. We do it differently, like than standard day-to-day speech. I would not say tame taras lagi che. That's incorrect. It's tam ne. I know it's not tame ne, but they just change it a bit. Tam ne taras lagi che. We take that ne And we add it to the end of names, we add it to the end of subject pronouns, we add it to the end of things. Typically someone's name, to be frank, but Kajal ne, Raj ne, whoever, someone ne taras lagi che. Okay. And again, if you want to see any specific, if you want to see like a really detailed grammar video on anything like these, I do realize that these are, I don't know, semi-complete explanations. They're not like super detailed, like exactly step by step. If you ever want to see any of those, you've seen videos like that on my channel, so I'm definitely capable of making them. Just leave a comment if it doesn't make sense, and I'll be happy to make like a super detailed video on it. Okay, anyway. Share my screen again. Here we go. Kajal ne taras lagi che. So Kajal's thirsty. Kajals are hathi, right? The elephant. Kajal pani pive che. Kajal is drinking pani. Pani is water. So Kajal pani pive che. You can probably see where this is going. Amite ene khadi. So amite ene khadi. So this the grammar in the sentence is a bit tricky. I'll give you a overview of what's going on here. So let me stop my screen share. I might share back on the whiteboard as well for this. We'll see how this is going. But okay, so Gujarati is a bit of a confusing language. In the sense that when they talk about things that happened in the past, so like I ate this or I went here, something that happened yesterday in the past, right? First of all, there's primarily two different tenses, or in other words, two different ways to do that. We're going to leave one of them completely aside. But for one of them, wonder how deep I want to get into this today. Okay. For one of them, the key thing to do in that tense is we have to add an a. So let me share my screen and show you how that works. That's kind of one of the big keys. It's probably like at least half the equation, maybe more. So here's a whiteboard. Let's get my little text box. Okay. So let's take something like an easy sentence. Amit chale che. Amit chale che, easy sentence, right? If Amit walked, sorry, let's actually do another one. Actually, I don't like this one. Let's do Amit, Amit Shak Kai. Okay, there we go. Amit Shak Kai che. This is in the present tense. Amit is eating shak. Okay, easy sentence. If Amit ate shak in the past, we're not going to get into every single conjugation rule, but the one thing that will happen, Amit amite, blah 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 blah. We add an a. Okay, so that happens with all sorts of things. Like even like something like let's say I said they did something, like they whatever, anything with they is e loco. One way to say they is e loco, not the only way, but e loco is kind of like those people, but that they use pretty much when we say they, we use e loco for the most part. So e loco are doing something now. If e loco did something before in the past, e loco e, and then you finish the rest of your sentence. Okay, so that's just a really fast kind of thing to know about the past tense. All right. So here we have amite. Amite. What's her name? Kajal. Kajal ne khadi. So he ate Kajal. All right. Raj chale che. Raj is walking. Raj ne taras lagi che. So Raj is thirsty. Raj pani pive che. And you can guess what happens next. Amite Raj ne khado. Anything here grammatically I want to point out? Um, no, I think we'll leave it. There's a couple of grammar things we could point out, but I'm gonna leave it here. I'll explain something really fast. If it doesn't make sense, that's okay. But there's some of you where you have a little bit of a grammar background, and so this might help you. In the past tense, if you eat something, if you eat something that is masculine, like like what's a masculine thing you could eat? Well, I mean, for example, here we have a Raj, right? Raj is the tiger's name, right? Raj is a man, it's a male, right? We're gonna have the verb will end in an o. So amite tene khadho, o at the end. But if you eat something feminine like jalebi, jalebi is feminine, or here we have, when Kajal was eaten, Kajal's a woman, it's a girl's name, right? We're gonna have kadhi. So kadhi, e for women, o for men. When you're eating something in the past or really doing any kind of action to something else in the past. I know that for some of you, it's going to be like, huh? What's Aslan talking about? Don't worry about it. If you have a bit of a grammar base, that will probably help a little bit. And I think that'll make sense. So probably worth throwing that in. Okay, so where are we? Raj cha leche. Here we go. Amite Raj ne khado. All right. Shivam cha leche. Shivam's walking. Shivam ne taras lagi che. So Shivam is very thirsty as well. But here things change. Shiva me. Remember in the past we have to have an a, so Shivam is his name, but Shivam a in the past, right? Shivam a Amit ne joyo. Joyo means he saw, so he saw Amit. Oh, here's Amit. There's Amit. Shiva me Amit ne joyo. So Shivam's a bit smarter than the other animals. Okay. Shivam Jhad is a tree. Jhad par, so on a tree. Chadiyo. Chadiyo means climbed. If Shivam were a woman, it would be chadi. Right? So chadi. Okay. So Shivam jhad par chadiyo. So he's climbed up on a tree. Shivam Amit par kudi padiyo. So kudi padiyo means you jump on something. Kudi is like kind of like jump. Padiyo is fall, so you jump fall. Kind of like you jump fall on something. Shivam Amit par kudi padiyo. So he jumped on Amit. And then the Vandro, the monkey says, Amit, mara mitro kya che? Amit, where are my friends? Mara mitro kya che? Mitro is friends. Mara mitro kya che? Word per word. Mara, my, mitro, friends. Kya che, where are they? And then Amit kya? Mara petma. Mara petma, in my stomach. Pet is stomach, ma is in, so mara petma. Mara petma che. Okay, longer sentence. Shivam Amitna petma gayo. So Shivam petma, so in the stomach, petma gayo. He went in. Gayo is like went in the past. E gayo petma. Shiva me tena mitro ne bachavya. So bachavya is like rescued. I'm not going to go through the grammar in this sentence too much. Actually, do I want to? Shiva me ena mitro ne bachavya. No, I'll leave the grammar aside a little bit. So Shiva me tena mitro ne bachavya. So he rescued his friends. He's climbed in the stomach and bachavya is rescued in the past. So he's rescued his friend Kajal. He's rescued his friend Raj. He's rescued everybody. Then he says, Mara mitro ne khasho nahi. Mara mitro ne khasho nahi. Don't eat my friends. Okay. For those that like grammar, again, I'm not going to worry too much. Actually, this is a pretty simple grammar point. Kasho is in the future tense. Kasho. We can use the future tense to make commands. So I'll tell you, like, don't do this or go do that. I can use the future tense to give you a command. So Mara mitro ne kasho nahi. Don't eat my friends. Last slide, or last page. Have Amit shakahari che. So now Amit is a vegetarian. Okay, silly little story. I'll go through the whole story here without pausing. I'll just read it to you, and then we'll wrap up. Here we go. અમિત શાકાહારી મગર છે. આ મગર છે એનું નામ અમિત છે. આ હાથી છે એનું નામ કાજલ છે. આ વાઘ છે એનું નામ રાજ છે. અને આ વાંદરો છે એનું નામ શિવમ છે. આ તળાવ છે. અમિત ચાલે છે. અમિત તળાવમાં જાય છે. અમિત તળાવમાં છે. કાજલ ચાલે છે. કાજલને તરસ લાગી છે. કાજલ પાણી પીવે છે. અને અમિતે એને ખાધી. રાજ ચાલે છે. રાજને તરસ લાગી છે. રાજ પાણી પીવે છે. અને અમિત એને ખાધો. શિવમ ચાલે છે. શિવમને તરસ લાગી છે. શિવમે અમિતને જોયો. શિવમ ઝાડ પર ચડ્યો અને શિવમ અમિત પર કૂદી પડ્યો. અમિત, મારા મિત્રો ક્યાં છે? મારા પેટમાં. શિવમ અમિતના પેટમાં ગયો. શિવમે એના મિત્રોને બચાવ્યા. મારા મિત્રોને ખાશો નહીં. અને હવે અમિત શાકાહારી છે. Okay, that wraps up today's silly little story. Hope the grammar tangents were helpful. Hope you guys learned a couple new words. Hope it was a funny, interesting story that sticks in your brain. And see you in the next episode. Aujo. Bye.